I'm going to talk about thermobaric weapons today and explain what they are and why they're a big deal. At the end of this video, you'll be able to tell the difference between a thermobaric explosion and a conventional one. But before I do that, I'd like viewers to consider how the phrase thermobaric weapons has entered their heads. Why is this suddenly a hot topic of discussion? Whenever a big story hits the mainstream media, it quickly accumulates a buzzword or two. These buzzwords spread through society faster than venereal disease. Spin doctors and media hacks are particularly adept at creating and propagating these buzzwords. Brexit was one of them, designed by a pro-Remain think tank. You aware of that one?
Yeah, I remember you talking about that recently, and it's supposed to kind of almost commodify and debase the idea of leaving the European Union.
And politicians and bureaucrats focus on winning the buzzword game, of course, because the entire debate is formulated around the language that people use. Brexit serves a number of roles. It gets people to think about leaving the EU from the EU's perspective. It conflates the act of leaving the EU with the long, drawn-out, messy process of actually disentangling the UK from the EU's various tendrils, agreements, regulations, bodies, and so on. And last but not least, I think it's an ugly and un-English word.
I'll stand by that.
Good. The issue of the day, though, is not Brexit. It is Ukraine, and a new corpus of buzzwords is rapidly infiltrating the public discourse. Just as the Syrian civil war saw the population at large learn of sarin gas, the invasion of Ukraine is filling people's brains with a lexicon of destructive weapons. And today, we have the buzzword thermobaric weapons. So what are they? Let's talk explosives. A normal bomb is a mass of reactive materials that undergo a rapid chemical reaction, releasing a lot of chemical energy over a split second in the form of gas and heat. We call this phenomenon an explosion, and we all know what an explosion is. It's pretty obvious. The reactive materials are usually contained within a shell, which breaks into a lot of sharp pieces that kill or maim anyone in the blast radius. There's much more nuance to the design and engineering of these bombs, but those are the basic principles. Let's take a look at this conventional explosion, firstly at normal speed and then in slow motion. I would say that's rather recognizable as an explosion.
I would say so too, funnily enough.
So if you watch, we want to see where the detonation happens, we want to see where the heat leaves the bomb, we want to see whether there's a pressure wave or a shock wave coming. Let's have another look at slow motion. So there were actually two explosions there. And essentially the people making this bomb were trying to make a fuel-air bomb, or a kind of thermobaric bomb, and they did not. This is not a thermobaric explosion. That's a conventional explosion. Now, thermobarics operate along different principles from normal bombs. They contain a high proportion of fuel, which disperses like an aerosol to cover a large dome-like or spherical volume, and they do not contain oxidizer. The explosion thus relies on atmospheric oxygen to feed its chemical reaction. This sucks in a large volume of the surrounding air, creating an explosion that generates an abnormally large pressure wave or shock wave. The shockwave is so powerful that it can demolish buildings and kill enemy combatants, or friendly ones, depending on where you're firing it. This is the Russian army we're talking about. Here is an example from the testing of the enormous American Blue 82 thermobaric bomb, also known as the Daisy Cutter. Have you heard of this one?
No, I haven't. In fact, I hadn't really heard about thermobaric weapons at all until the media started talking about them.
Yeah, funny that, isn't it? Me neither. But this was used in both the Vietnam War and the Gulf War and was replaced in 2008 by the Moab, which you may have heard of.
I have
the
indeed,
mother of all bombs. So pay particular attention to the blast wave and the effect on the house in this footage. You see the shockwave there?
Yeah, it's pretty clear.
Not
want to be in that house.
Yeah, there's an explosion that takes place, but actually the house isn't destroyed by the explosion, it's the pressure wave. We can also see, there's another angle, another one. You just notice it's being disintegrated by this shockwave.
So is the shockwave and the pressure wave, they're the same thing,
yes,
more or less?
Yes.
Okay.
So a shockwave is essentially a pressure differential. It's if you you think normally the air is at a standard pressure everywhere, or atmospheric pressure, you might say. But a pressure wave is basically a line where if you were to freeze time and measure it, then you have normal pressure, and all of a sudden you have a spike in pressure, and then you have normal pressure again. And it's that spike which causes huge amounts of violence because it shakes apart things that it hits, more or less. So let's just... I was going to play that twice, but I think it was actually very clear from the first one. So let's go on and have a look at the next clip, which is from an American documentary showing the Blue 82 being used to clear jungle in Vietnam for helicopter landings, which is one of its most iconic uses. Let's go.
But it was one unique conventional bomb that was the climax of high explosives in Vietnam. Called Big Blue 82, it was a blockbuster that caused injuries for miles. At 15,000 pounds, a single bomb was the entire cargo for the journey into hostile airspace.
Possibly the most 80s American thing I've ever seen.
Music in the background as well.
Very simply.
Delivered from the hold of a C-130 cargo plane, the bomb was slowed by a parachute and drifted to its target. When it exploded, the crater was enormous and the destruction total. It remains the single largest conventional bomb dropped on enemy forces.
The Americans also dropped the Blue 82 on Iraqi forces during Operation Desert Storm in 2003. And during the war in Afghanistan, they developed a new generation of enormous thermobarics in the Blue 118 2,000-pound bomb, which contains 560 pounds of thermobaric explosive. There is also a thermobaric warhead for Hellfire missiles.
That doesn't sound particularly nice.
No,
funny enough.
you wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of them, would you? So the reason I'm bringing all these examples up is to underline the fact that the term thermobaric weapons may be new to you, new to us, but these weapons are absolutely not new. Until very recently, they were usually referred to by other names like fuel-air explosives, that's the most common one, or vacuum bombs. Thermobaric means of or relating to heat and pressure, and it underlines the fact that it's the pressure wave that does most of the damage. The media has probably seized on the word thermobaric because it sounds like something a Romulan commander would fire at Captain Picard, a scary and inhumane weapon that breaks all the rules of war. The fact is that the USA and all advanced militaries have been using these so-called thermobaric weapons for decades. So let's look at how the Russians are employing thermobaric weapons. The Russians use a miniaturized thermobaric warhead placed onto Soviet tank chassis in multiple rocket launcher pods. These are called TOS-1A flamethrower missile launcher systems. The Ukrainians also possess thermobaric weapons, but the media has always referred to them by less catchy names, such as disposable rocket-assisted flamethrower, like you see this example here. This was in the possession of the defenders of Kharkiv.
That seems like a very elaborate way of avoiding saying the same thing, isn't it?
It would break the narrative to hear that both sides have thermobaric weapons, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
In the words of David Gilmour, haven't you heard? It's a battle of words, and most of them are right. And then if we go to the next clip, this is more of an explanation of the RPV-16 thermobaric rocket launcher, which is what we just saw a pile of. It's primarily an anti-infantry weapon designed to clear out trenches, bunkers, buildings, etc. But this is how the Russians use their thermobaric rocket launcher systems in conventional war. And again, keep an eye out for the shockwaves. Let's go.
You could actually see the ground moving. Like it was almost shifting like an earthquake.
So, yeah, like you can see the way that they do it. They line up about 5 or 6 of them by the looks of it. and they just pick an area and destroy anything that is in that area.
It's horrifying, actually. It makes me very glad I'm not a soldier.
Yeah, it just shows you the power of modern war and modern artillery. So in typical Russian style, they're used for mass artillery bombardment and are particularly effective against vehicles, urban areas, and bunkers, as the blast effectively flattens anything in close range, like the daisy cutter. The blast sucks the air out of the surrounding area and ruptures infantry organs. It will literally burst your lungs.
Ugh.
Ultimately, the idea of a humane lethal weapon is a curious fiction of developed nations. Thermobaric weapons are arguably not intrinsically less humane than so-called normal bombs and shells. There is an argument that, at close to medium range, they are more humane against infantry than conventional bombs reliant on shrapnel, which can cause, say, loss of limbs or other serious physical disfigurement. But here's a medical paper discussing the effects of vacuum bomb blast waves on the human body. It's pretty much what you'd expect. Not good news. We'll leave the links in the description on our website if you want to go and read through that yourself. The thing that determines the humanity or inhumanity of a weapon is how it is used, and significant outrage has been generated in the West by claims that the Russians are using thermobaric weapons against civilian areas. We cannot confirm or deny this claim at present, reporting just 1 week after the outbreak of the war, but we have yet to see the area denial thermobaric bombardment shown clearly in the last clip, which is what the entire weapons system is designed for. So we have yet to see the Russians doing that to, say, a residential area. Now that we've gone through how thermobaric weapons work, let's play a game and see if you can identify the thermobaric weapon in the following clips. Let's go.
Ох, ёб твою мать, нахуй.
Thermobaric or not?
I would say not.
Correct. Why?
Because it looked like a conventional explosion. I can't really pinpoint. I'm just going by vibes, really.
Yeah. It was certainly not what we saw earlier with the multiple launch rocket systems. That is believed to be an ammunition dump explosion.
Okay.
So it's a massive explosion.
Isn't that the one that happened in Ukraine?
Yes.
I thought I recognised it.
Quite recently. How about this one?
I would guess that would be a thermobaric weapon.
It was not.
It wasn't?
That was also an ammunition dump explosion.
Oh, right.
So basically, the reason I bring these in is to make the point that the media has latched onto this word thermobaric weapon. They are finding any large explosion they can get their hands on and saying that's a thermobaric weapon. And that one was geolocated to not be. But so I expect that if thermobaric weapons are used in large quantities, we will see them used in the way that we saw in the Russian video, with area denial, rather than just occasional massive explosions. Now, curiously enough, Andrew Feinberg, the American White House correspondent for The Independent, was also fooled by that clip, which doesn't actually show you much of the explosion itself, more just the boom, although you can see that there has been some kind of strike before the recording starts. He posted it on Twitter to his many, many followers saying, this thermobaric weapon strike is a war crime.
And obviously, it wasn't actually a thermobaric weapon.
No, of course not. But, you know, the lie makes its way twice around the world before the truth has its boots on. Speaking of which, let's see what The Sun has to say. So this is the US Sun here. The headline, Killing Machine, Putin unleashes horrifying vacuum bombs in Ukraine as video shows huge mushroom cloud after strike. Russia's terrifying vacuum bombs that can explode enemy troops' lungs have been deployed near Ukraine's second city of Kharkiv, in the latest indication that Vladimir Putin is escalating the conflict. A vacuum bomb was reportedly dropped on an oil depot, local officials have claimed. The deadly weapons are banned under the Geneva Convention. As far as I'm aware, they're not banned under the Geneva Convention per se, but use of them against civilians is, like most weapons, banned under the Geneva Convention.
Yeah,
that's kind of the point of the Geneva Convention. So there's so much they have wrong here because they showed that clip. I believe they were trying to say that the clip we just saw was the thermobaric bomb. So they were completely off put by it as well.
Have you noticed that Anthony Blair, contributor...
I don't think it's the Blair that we know, and yeah.
It's not Tony.
No. So, to summarise, You should now know what a thermobaric weapon is. You should know that the media is pushing this vocabulary onto the population to support a narrative of war crimes which is as yet unconfirmed, and you should be sceptical of the information coming out of the media about this war. I've been publishing my research into the conflict over at ukraineobservatory.org, and if you want daily information that's not saturated by these abysmal mainstream takes, then please consider checking it out. Thank you.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, you can go over to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the content we have on the site, such as this contemplation series, which is premium, the philosophy of objectivism, which Josh did on the weekend. So if you want to find out what else Josh is up to, you can also follow him on Getter, of course, at @Josh_firm. Thank you and goodbye.